She thought she was becoming the granddaughter her grandmother deserved. She never realized she was becoming part of someone else's plan. For years, Grace Holt cared for her 84-year-old mother while her brother, Victor, stayed away. Then, Victor sent his 26-year-old daughter, Amber. Within months, Amber and her grandmother became inseparable. A new will followed. Grace lost nearly everything, and $3.4 million was placed in Amber's name. It looked like a grandmother's final gift to the granddaughter she loved most. But inside the courtroom, Amber broke down in tears after discovering she had never been the beneficiary. She had been the bait. Stay with us until the very end, because today's story proves that the cruelest family betrayals don't always manipulate the elderly. Sometimes they manipulate the very people who believe they're acting out of love. Eleanor Holt was 84 years old and had lived in Louisville, Kentucky her entire life, working as a pediatric nurse for 29 years before retiring in 2003. She had raised 2 children after her husband passed in 1998 and had built an estate valued at $3.4 million, including her home, 3 investment accounts, and a savings portfolio that had grown steadily through decades of careful management. Her younger daughter, Grace, 42, had become her closest companion and daily support following a stroke in 2020 that had limited Eleanor's independence significantly. Grace visited every single day, managed her medications, attended every appointment, and maintained the kind of quiet, unconditional presence that Eleanor had come to rely on completely. Her son, Victor, 54, had lived in Indianapolis for over a decade and had maintained what could most accurately be described as a comfortable distance from the family's daily life. He called occasionally, appeared at Christmas, and had never played any meaningful role in his mother's care. Grace had long since accepted this as simply the reality of their family and had not spent significant energy resenting it. Victor's financial situation in 2021 was more precarious than anyone outside his immediate household understood. His import business had been losing revenue for 2 consecutive years, and a series of poor inventory decisions had left him with debt obligations he could not meet from operating income. He had explored conventional financing options and had been declined. He had a different kind of resource that he had not yet considered fully. His daughter Amber, 26, had graduated with a degree in social work and was working at a community services organization in Indianapolis. She was warm, genuinely empathetic, and had the kind of easy emotional attentiveness that made people feel seen in her company. She had met her grandmother only a handful of times during her childhood and had always felt a quiet regret about the distance that geography and family patterns had created between them. Victor called Amber in the spring of 2022 and told her he had been thinking about Eleanor and felt guilty that they had all allowed the distance to become permanent. He told Amber that Eleanor was aging and that Amber had a gift for connecting with people that he had always admired. He told her that spending time with her grandmother would mean something real to both of them, and that it might also give Grace some relief from the constant demands of caregiving. Amber believed every word. She began visiting Louisville every few weeks and eventually every weekend. Eleanor responded to her with a warmth that neither of them had expected and both of them cherished. They shared meals, old photographs, stories about the family that Eleanor had never told anyone because no one had sat still enough to ask. Amber listened with genuine attention and returned to every conversation they had left unfinished. Eleanor told Grace that having Amber nearby felt like a gift she had not known she needed. Grace was genuinely happy about the relationship. She had no reason to examine it more closely. She told herself that Victor had finally done something right. What Victor had been doing during those months was something entirely different. He had identified the specific legal mechanism he intended to use. He had researched it carefully and had understood that a will revision directing assets to Amber would be significantly harder to challenge than one directing them to Victor directly.
given the genuine relationship that was developing between Amber and Eleanor. He had also identified that Amber's financial accounts were structured in a way that gave him significant informal control, as Amber had used his business banking relationships for her own accounts during a period of financial transition after college and had not yet fully separated them. In November of 2022, Victor visited Louisville and accompanied Eleanor to what he described to both Eleanor and Amber as a routine estate planning update. He had arranged the appointment through a document preparation service he had identified online. He told Eleanor that the update would ensure Amber was protected if anything happened to Eleanor unexpectedly, framing it as a natural expression of the love Eleanor had been showing Amber all year. Eleanor signed the revised will that afternoon. The document directed the full estate to Amber. Grace was not mentioned.
Amber was not present at the signing. Victor had told her Eleanor had wanted to handle the paperwork privately and had asked him to accompany her. Amber had not questioned it. Eleanor Holt passed away in February of 2023. Victor filed the will within 2 weeks. Grace discovered the document when the estate attorney contacted her. She called Amber immediately. The conversation that followed lasted 2 hours. By the end of it, Amber was asking Victor questions he had not prepared answers for. Victor told Amber that Eleanor had genuinely wanted her to have the estate and that Grace had been adequately provided for in other ways. When Amber asked him to show her the other provisions in the will, Victor could not produce them because they did not exist. When Amber asked him why her estate accounts had been structured through his business banking relationships, Victor's explanation was incomplete and inconsistent. Amber called Grace back the same evening and said she wanted to help. Grace retained attorney Diana Ross, a probate litigator in Louisville with 16 years of experience. Diana filed the will contest and immediately requested Eleanor's medical records and the document preparation services records from the appointment. She then obtained Amber's account records, which showed the specific banking structure Victor had described, and confirmed that Victor held informal administrative access to accounts in Amber's name. Diana retained a forensic accountant who traced the estate transfer pathway and identified that under the will's structure, the assets directed to Amber would have flowed into accounts Victor could access, a fact that Victor had understood and that Amber had not. The forensic accountant confirmed that if the will had been executed as filed, Victor would have had practical control over the estate within months. Eleanor's medical records from the period surrounding the signing documented increasing cognitive fragility and a specific note from her neurologist recommending that Eleanor not make significant legal or financial decisions without independent counsel present. That recommendation had not been communicated to the document preparation service. Victor had not disclosed it. The hearing was held before the Honorable Judge Samuel Webb at the Jefferson County Probate Court. Diana Ross presented the medical records, the forensic account analysis, the document preparation service records, and the banking structure connecting Victor to Amber's accounts. She presented the timeline of Victor's financial difficulties alongside the timeline of Amber's visits, demonstrating that the two had begun simultaneously. Then she called Amber Holt to testify. Amber walked to the witness box and sat down. She had asked her own attorney whether she was required to testify. Her attorney had told her she was not required. She had said she wanted to. She described every visit she had made to Louisville and the genuine love she had developed for her grandmother during those months. She described the conversation with her father in the spring of 2022, the specific things he had said, and the way she had understood them at the time. She described the phone call with Grace after the will was filed, the conversation with her father that had followed,
and the moment she had understood that the relationship she had believed she was building freely had been designed by someone else for a purpose she had not known about. She told the court that her grandmother had been one of the most remarkable people she had ever known. She told the court that she was grateful for every hour she had spent with her, and that learning what those hours had been used for by her father was something she did not yet have the language to fully describe. She was crying before she finished. She did not stop until after she stepped down. She did not look at her father's table once during the entire testimony. Victor's attorney argued Eleanor had made a genuine decision to honor the relationship she had developed with Amber. Diana Ross asked the court to consider what genuine looked like when the relationship had been initiated at Victor's specific direction, when the account structure gave Victor practical control over the assets directed to Amber, when Eleanor's own neurologist had recommended against significant legal or financial decisions without independent counsel, and when the document had been arranged through a service that required no attorney review and asked no questions about capacity. Judge Samuel Webb ruled the will invalid, finding that the circumstances surrounding its creation reflected a deliberate scheme to exploit Eleanor's affection for her granddaughter while concealing the true beneficiary of the arrangement. He ordered the estate distributed to Grace under Eleanor's original will. He referred Victor Holt to the Jefferson County District Attorney for elder financial exploitation, fraud, and criminal misuse of a family relationship. Victor was convicted and sentenced to 6 years in Kentucky State Prison. Amber did not attend the sentencing. She had said everything she needed to say in the witness box. She continued visiting Louisville after the proceedings concluded, not for the estate but for Grace, who had spent years caring for a mother they had both loved, and who was now navigating a family that looked very different from the one she had grown up in. Grace told her once that Eleanor always said Amber reminded her of herself at that age. Amber told Grace she hoped that was still true, given everything. Eleanor Holt had spent 29 years caring for other people's children. Her granddaughter had spent a year caring for her with a love that was entirely real, even when the circumstances that had brought her there were not. The court ensured that love was honored the right way, and the young woman who had been used as an instrument, in the end, became the voice that made it impossible for the instrument to work. Would you have done what Amber did, knowing what it would cost your relationship with your father? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story moved you, subscribe to Court of Shadows for more courtroom drama stories every week.